Thank you. Mr. Kavanaugh, do we have any data as far as like average wait times or anything at our polling places during Election Day?
There are some anecdotal studies of particular jurisdictions in the state that have had problems. I'm not aware of any systematic data that gives statewide averages, but anecdotal evidence suggests that the wait time, and some of our personal experiences waiting on long lines suggest that sometimes the wait time is quite long, perhaps unacceptably so.
Anecdotally, though, but we don't, as far as you know, we don't have any specific data. And, I mean, I don't think it's been widely reported in New York State that there's a real problem to access to polling places or long wait lines, as in some other states we have.
I would say it has been. When I said we don't have data but we have anecdotal evidence, I don't mean to suggest that there's no information or there's no numbers out there. I think there are many poll sites around the state, and I don't think we can say definitively what the average wait time statewide is or how many poll sites have excessive wait. There are clearly, including, some of us have waited in lines at our own poll sites that are unreasonably long. There are clearly routine news stories about excessive wait times at poll sites in some parts of the state.
Thank you. Yeah. On the bill?
On the bill, Mr. Walter.
Mr. Speaker, each year I stand up when we debate this bill, and I talk about the proud expression of our history and heritage that voting on Election Day is to me, and I think to many of us. It's an annual reaffirmation of our founding principles, where we come together in a statement of who we are, not just as individuals, but as a democratic society. The act of voting unifies each and every one of us, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, independents, conservatives, or unaffiliated voters. Despite all of the issues that divide us, when we go to the polls as a community, as a state, as a nation, we go as free people in a democratic society together, bound by the principles of our Constitution and our country. Nothing can replace that. Early voting would take away from that, would take away from that communal bond that we have as we go to the polls on the same day together. So much of our culture is divided now. There's so little that still unifies us. No, we don't all sit around on Thursday night and watch Cheers anymore. We're all watching all of our own little individual stations. Our culture has separated. Some of us watch Fox News, some of us watch MSNBC, some of us watch CNN. But nobody sits around and watches Walter Cronkite on the nightly news anymore. The one thing that still unifies us as a state and a country is going to the poll on Election Day and voting together. We've seen images all across the world in recent years of people voting for the first time in their lives. Countries that have been oppressed by dictators, people that finally have the opportunity to go to the polls. The images of those people with the indelible ink on their finger, crying because they finally have the opportunity to express their opinion about how they want to be governed. Have we become so disconnected as a society, so insular, and so obsessed with convenience that we are willing to reduce voting to the rote task of going to the grocery store or picking up the dry cleaning? Voting should be a priority. It should be valued, and it should be something that we all do together. By voting as a community, we reaffirm our faith in the great experiment that we call America. Anything that would diminish that, which I think that early voting does, diminishes democracy itself. And I can't vote to diminish democracy. Thank you.
Ms. Lipton.
Yes, on the bill, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the sponsor for this very important piece of legislation. The experience in other states has been very, very clear that more people are able to vote. We see greater voter turnout when there is early voting available. some people are still living back in the 50s, and they think that, people are sitting home and they're, they have spare time on their hands. These days, people are working 2 jobs. They have greater family responsibilities very often. They work longer hours many times, and it's actually very hard. They work out of town. It's very hard to get to the polls sometimes for people. We've seen much diminished, really shockingly diminished voter turnout in New York State. So this is a very important mechanism to increase voter turnout, which is so important to a flourishing democracy. So I want to express my strong support for this bill and my appreciation for the sponsor, and I encourage all my colleagues to vote in the affirmative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Mr. Murray,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield for a few questions?
will you yield, Mr. Kavanaugh?
Yes, Mr.
Mr.
Speaker.
Kavanaugh yields.
Thank you. Ryan, we talked about the nuts and bolts, but could we talk about the purpose of the bill? What is the reason that we need to bring this bill forward?
The purpose of this bill is to serve as one of many steps we're taking today in the bills we've passed today and in the last few days to ensure that we are creating a voter system that reflects the sort of modern realities that a colleague just spoke about in terms of people's lives, and ensures that we make an attempt to make voting a reasonably convenient thing and not put undue obstacles in the path of New Yorkers trying to participate in selecting their government.
But I'm a little confused because we used a couple of examples. So on one hand, we want to make it easier because maybe we don't have enough people coming out. But on the other hand, we're talking about people waiting in lines and the delays of being able to vote. So which one is it? Do we have too many coming? Is it too long of a wait? Or it's inconvenient and we don't have enough people coming? Or is it both?
I'm not sure I understand why those would be inconsistent. I mean, if a poll site, if an early poll site or an election day poll site has a really long line, that's probably an issue we should address. We think, many of us think, and experiences in other states demonstrate that when people have a week in which to choose to vote, a substantial fraction of them will make that choice unless we mandate that they all show up on the same day. And when they make that choice, it relieves pressure on the administration of a one-day election. So it makes it easier for people who have to administer the election on that day, and it also makes it easier for voters who have to participate in that if some fraction of their fellow citizens have chosen to vote previously.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. Mr. Speaker, on the bill?
On the bill, Mr. Murray.
So my colleague gave a very eloquent speech about the patriotism and the bond that brings about in voting. You know, my son served 2 tours of duty, one in Iraq, one in Afghanistan. He was over there fighting to protect our right and our privilege to vote. And I think it's something we've been doing for a couple of hundred years now, all on one day, on Election Day, that big day where we get to go and choose our leaders. It is a right, it is a privilege that we have. I don't think we need to make it easier. If you can't make it on Election Day, we already have absentee ballots. I mean, it's no secret. You can apply to vote by absentee. We have things in place to handle that. But I don't think, and if we're seeing a decline in voter participation, I don't think it's because it's inconvenient. You see, I think, and what I'm hearing from a lot of voters out there, is it's getting to the point of apathy because, quite frankly, the voters are disgusted. They're angry. They don't think that we're hearing them. You know, we talk about ethics reform. We've had corruption after corruption after corruption going on, and we're up here, and the one thing we might be tackling the pension forfeiture bill, maybe, hopefully. But there's so much more we could do. We could tackle things like term limits on leadership positions, term limits on committee chairs, banning campaign funds, using campaign funds for a criminal defense for an elected official who's broken the law. I mean, why don't we take these steps That might encourage some voter participation. That might give the voters a reason to come out and trust us again, because quite frankly, they don't. That's the pity of it all. They don't need to make it, we don't need to make it easier for them. We need to give them more of a reason to come out. Because if we're not paying attention, the public is angry. They're angry right now because we don't seem to be listening. So before we do bills like this that maybe try to make it more convenient or easy, I would suggest we concentrate on the bills that send the right message to the public, to send the message that we hear what they're saying, we hear their frustration, and we too would like to clean up Albany and clean up the corruption. So I would encourage us moving in that direction before this direction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Levine. Mr. Castorina.
Will the sponsor yield?
Will you yield, Mr. Kavanaugh?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Kavanaugh yields.
Mr. Kavanaugh, I was formerly a commissioner of the Board of Elections in New York City and Richmond County. Do you know how many election districts there are in Brooklyn, for instance?
Election districts?
Yes.
I don't. As you know, the size of election districts can vary widely, but a great many.
There are literally hundreds, okay? The issue that we have is that the optical reader machines, my understanding is that they need to be programmed for the particular election. So if you're going to have 5 locations, for instance, in the county of Kings, in the county of Richmond, you need to have the infrastructure logistics to be able to handle the counting of the votes with the optical reader equipment. And the Help America Vote Act money did not provide us with all of the additional resources to procure more machines. So I agree with the concept of this bill. I think that we should be welcoming people to the polls and encouraging voting. There's no question about it. I just wonder, what do you say about the logistics issue?
A few things, and thank you for the questions. First of all, I would say that a majority of states in America have figured out these logistics, and many of them have large jurisdictions like Los Angeles and Chicago and other places where they run elections on a very large scale, and 30 states in America have solved this, many of them many years ago now. So these are problems that people in many other places have figured out. The second thing I would say is the bill specifies that optical scanning machines used for early voting can be reused on Election Day. This is not going to require boards of elections to acquire a totally new set of machines. Obviously, they would need to presumably have separate portable memory devices so that the tally of the votes from those machines is kept separately from the Election Day tally. In addition, again, the ballots that have to be produced for an election are the same ballots the ballots that would have to be produced for early voting are the same ballots that would have to be produced for that election. There is not a special early voting ballot that is required by this bill. You would presumably have to have those ballots available 8 days earlier in the cycle. But other than that, we're not making much new requirement.
I understand that, and that's a fair point. You would be using the same ballots.
If I may, just
Sure.
two more things responsive to your last question. We have another bill that we have moved in this House that expands the legal size of election districts and would create fewer election districts, and that is one way that we could make election administration in Staten Island and Brooklyn and other places easier. There are many other steps we could take as well. This bill presumably makes it harder because you have to do some election administration before Election Day. It presumably makes it easier to do elections on Election Day because you've discovered some concerns that you have. We might, for example, in Kings have noticed that many people were improperly purged 8 days before Election Day rather than on Election Day had we had early voting. So this has advantages and disadvantages for people administering elections. But again, there are other steps we could take to address those concerns.
Mr. Kavanaugh, I understand that point, but my question was more with respect to the machines that count the ballots. So they need to be programmed. There needs to be many. And logistically, I don't know how they would possibly fit them all into a single polling place. In addition, there's a movement in the city to make it so that schools will be closed on dates when there are elections because parents are very much concerned about transient individuals coming in and out of schools in this day and age without proper security. And early voting is going to put schools, which are typically voting sites in New York City particularly, in a position where they're going to be opening their doors to essentially strangers to the school for a long period of time without ample security. What do you say about that particular concern?
I would say that that concern is not necessarily created by this bill. I would say that if the experience in New York matches the experience in other places, a substantial number of people will vote early. I don't think there's any particular reason to think that early polling sites will be schools. Schools are chosen because when you are running an election on a single day, you need a building in every neighborhood. These will be presumably sites with a larger capacity where people are more likely to travel to a central location. So this would be an opportunity for people administering elections who may have that concern to reduce crowding in schools and crowd control in schools on election day by choosing other sites if they choose to do so. And again, that would be a county-by-county decision.
Mr. Speaker, on the bill?
On the bill, sir.
I applaud the sponsor for the concept. I think opening up the notion of bringing more people out to the polls is very important. Voter turnout has been abysmal. We've been looking at numbers under 20%. That'd be a high number. It's very much concerning. I have particular problems with this bill that are fiscal. I don't see how the city of New York, for instance, would be able to afford this in terms of the personnel, in terms of the equipment. I just don't see how this bill provides for the resources, because it doesn't. I also am concerned about voter disenfranchisement, because if we're going to be moving locations, we have folks that are used to, for decades, voting at the same elementary school, the same polling site. And I have to tell you, anytime that the Board of Elections, because of an emergency or some type of a facilities issue, would have to change a polling site, I can't tell you the number of complaints and concerns that people had, even if they had to move just a few blocks over to a different polling location. So that's an issue where we need to be concerned about the chance of perhaps disenfranchising folks if we did enact this legislation. But I think that it's clear that the concept is a good one, but I don't think that this bill really takes care of all of the presumed issues that would come out of this legislation were it to be passed. And as a result, I'm going to be voting in the negative on it, but I certainly encourage the sponsor and others in the Election Law Committee to come up with other ways and measures so that we can accomplish a goal such as this, but do it in a way that makes sure that we can afford it, that we can protect students, we can protect schools, and make sure that we're not opening up our schools to, God forbid, all kinds of issues that we've seen over the recent few years, including Sandy Hook and others. We have to be very careful. Security is at the tip of the spear right now, and I think everybody is very much concerned, especially when it comes to our children. So, Mr. Speaker, I withdraw my request, and I'll be voting in the negative. Thank you.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect January 1st.
Clerk will record the vote. Mr. Levine to explain his vote.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. So we've heard some arguments that I take to be made in good faith against this bill. And one of the arguments is that it's just not democratic, that our democratic values are going to be diminished by early voting. Well, 34 states in the United States have early voting, and I don't think those states are any less democratically oriented than New York State is, and they managed to be able to get more people out to vote. New York makes it very, very difficult for people to vote. I think anything we can do to help is a step in the right direction. Now, in addition to those 34 states, there are 3 other states, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, in which you can vote by mail, simply vote by mail. Now, that's democratic. To me, democratic process means you get more people involved in the process. Now, I may have been a little bit wrong when I gave you the figure 34 states, because I think Ohio was listed as one of them, and I'm pretty sure that in order to suppress votes, Ohio has made it more difficult recently for people to cast these ballots that are not in person. So I think this is a good thing. Let's move in this direction. More people involved, the better it is for democracy. I'm very happy to vote in the affirmative, and I withdraw my request.
Mr. Levine in the affirmative. Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on this occasion to support this bill. As someone who is a district leader for over a decade, monitoring the polls, and living in a very dense environment, I think that one of the things we need more than anything else is the ability for people to cast their ballots on a day other than Election Day. In my assembly district has 115 election districts. And I can tell you, with the lines around the street and the confusion on Election Day and the difficulty that people in New York City often have just getting to the polls because of their very busy schedules, the more days that we can provide for people to vote, the better. So I am totally in support of this bill and will be voting in the affirmative. Thank you.
Ms. Simon in the affirmative. Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my honor and my privilege to be able to explain my vote on this very important topic. When I think about early voting and all of the wonderful opportunities it opens up, I am reminded of Election Day when we voted for our president in the year 2008, and the number of people who stood on line to come out and cast their ballot. There were people who were out and lines were around the corner, and people stood on lines all day in order to get that opportunity. And I'm also reminded of a program that was initiated throughout our country called Soul to the Hole. And it was Soul to the Pole. Soul to the Hole is a basketball game in my district. And Soul to the Polls was an initiative where on Sunday mornings in churches, all of the congregants would leave church on this particular day and head over to the polls, whether it be by church van, by caravan, or otherwise. And when people saw the numbers of African-American voters who were showing up to vote on the poll and the number of women, it scared the living heck out of them. And that's when they started to roll back all of the advances that we have made across the country where early voting is a reality. So today, I say that it's time for New York State to join the other 37 states across our country that already has early voting as an opportunity. It's something that is real, it's something that is doable, and the time for us to do this is right now. So I congratulate the sponsor for introducing this very important piece of legislation. I look forward to working with him in order to make this a real reality here in our state. So I'm voting in the affirmative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome, Ms. Walker, in the affirmative. And Ms. Walker, I played in that tournament. So, Mr. Dinowitz to explain his vote.
Thank you. First, thank you to the sponsor of this bill. You know, I've been involved in campaigns for many, many years now, and I like doing things a certain way. I like lever voting machines instead of that garbage we have now. But this is what we have now. I like being able to campaign on primary day or election day, knowing that I can get everybody's vote. But some people may have already voted if we have early voting. But here's the thing. We are a democracy. We should want everybody to vote. We should want to make voting as easy as possible for people and as many people as possible. And it looks to me like there have been two camps in this country when it comes to these type of issues. There's one group that wants people to come in to vote, to open up the doors, to encourage maximum participation. And then there are others who want to suppress voting, who are scared of a lot of people voting, who want to set up every possible roadblock to prevent people from voting in any way that they can. In New York, we should be leading the way to encourage maximum participation. Regardless of how people are going to vote, we should want every last person who is eligible to vote. And that's why it is very important to pass this bill, and I vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Dinowitz in the affirmative. Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to remind people that in the year 2000, nationally, only 54% of the eligible voters came out. 46% stayed home. The next election on the presidential year, 60% came out, 40% stayed home. When Barack Obama ran in 2008, 62% came out and 38% stayed home. Then in 2012, it dropped back down to 57% coming out and 43% stayed home. And some people's response to people staying home said, let's do voter ID so we can get more people to stay home, especially black people. Let's get the voter ID going. So when we introduce something like early voting or same-day registration to try to increase turnout, those were the figures for a national election. If you look at the primaries in New York, you're talking about 20%. 80% of the people stay home. We have to do something about that. This is one step in the right direction to do something about that. The very least we could do is look at how we can increase voter turnout, shorten lines, and get people to the polls to vote. We always come up with these baseless fears. Something's going to happen to the children in the school if we have the schools open up. That's not real. That's a baseless fear. The schools are already open. We already need security. Of course, incidents can happen. This bill does not increase those incidents. I vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Barron in the affirmative. Mr. Mosley.
In my district, I'm very proud of the fact that we have some of the highest voter turnout in the state of New York. But unfortunately, New York ranks 49th out of 50 states when it comes to voter turnout. Annually, we pull out 28, 27% of our registered voters. But the one thing that was disturbing to me in this past presidential election primary is that my district, along with my colleague, Annette Robinson, we had roughly 13,000 to 14,000 voters purged from our list. Many of these voters have been voting for many years, if not decades. Voted for me, voted for my colleagues in central Brooklyn for many, many years. But one of the also things that was very disturbing is that there were a lot of people who wanted to vote, but who weren't just educated the fact that they needed to register to vote at a given period of time in order to meet certain deadlines. I think that this bill, sponsored by my colleague, would really serve as a catalyst towards curtailing some of those issues that we see in our districts. I have over 100 EDs in my district, a multitude of polling sites that are canvassed by all types of individuals, black, white, young, old, retirees, professionals, educated, non-educated. But anything that would provide more voter participation in the state of New York, I applaud. It's something that is absolutely needed for us, for our state, and it's deplorable that we rank so low, given that we are supposed to be so progressive in our thoughts and in our actions and in our policies. So I vote in the affirmative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Mosley in the affirmative. Mr. Zembrowski.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the sponsor who has put forth a host of measures seeking to encourage voting across the state of New York. And I, in general, favor early voting, and I'm going to cast my vote in the affirmative.
I do, however, think we need to continue, if this bill does not pass the other house and become law, to look at ways to ease some of the costs of our counties. Small things such as the fact that ballots sometimes cost anywhere between 30 cents to 50 cents, and how many of these ballots do they have to keep at sort of these early voting sites? Is it all eligible voters? And all those things add up for counties that are oftentimes struggling and don't have the ability, due to the tax cap and other things, as we try to keep property taxes down, to raise additional revenue. In addition, I'd like to see some more ability to look out at a county-by-county approach. In my home county of Rockland, we have 5 towns, and we could work within a town-wide structure instead of sort of the 50,000 at least 7 structure, because we already have a structure within these towns, town halls and types of things that we could utilize, which are easily acceptable to all those residents. So I'd like to not see sort of a one-size-fits-all approach, but an approach that can take into consideration all the various municipalities that we have around the state. And lastly, I'd like to consider a model, if we're looking for ways to compromise, where we incorporate the weekend before, perhaps in a 4-day process, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Look at those type of things as we deal with the counties in order to get the most amount of people voting, but at the same time be cognizant of the fact that these counties are going to have to set up an entire new structure, hire people, and pay them for 8 times the time that they had to do it in the past. So in concept, I agree with this. I agree with moving it forward, Mr. Speaker, but I ask the sponsor to consider that in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Zimbrowski, in the affirmative. Mr. Rea.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this particular piece of legislation. I believe the sponsor is carrying, and we have passed really the solution to this problem, and that is to allow voting by absentee ballot in the county that you reside, even if you are going to be at home. Quite honestly, there's Long Island. There's a reason Long Island's called long. There's been times that I've been on the furthest east end of Long Island, and it would take me roughly an hour and a half just to get back to my house to be able to vote. I take exception with one of the prior speakers' comments that nothing can happen by opening up schools to even more days and allowing complete strangers basically to come in. We had incidents on Long Island this past election, this past primary election, in which people found they weren't registered to vote and kicked over tables and threatened people, and they were arrested. And the last thing we want to do is encourage more days that can happen, because Lord knows we could have another Newtown happen because if someone gets agitated because they can't vote. So opening up schools for more and more days for that opportunity to happen, I don't think is the way to go. So therefore, I withdraw my request and I vote in the negative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Robertson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to speak on this matter. I, too, like my colleague, Ms. Simon, served as the district leader of the 56th Assembly District and have done so for more years than I can count almost. And in that process, we have always wanted to increase and encourage voter registration and voter education and voting. And so with that, I think that a measure such as early voting would certainly enhance the process for people. Would also help to be able to educate people on the process. As I understand it, that many people came to the polls that were not registered because they didn't realize that we had closed primaries in the state of New York. And so therefore, those that were not registered in the party were unable to vote. And so I think that we have an opportunity here when we talk about early voting to give people an opportunity that for whatever reasons that they might not be able to get to the polls or that particular day, that we give them an opportunity to be able to come in and vote so that they can take care of their obligation and feel comfortable with that. So I want to commend the sponsor on this legislation, and hopefully that we can move forward. Voting is something for the community that I represent was denied. Voting was denied to the people that I represent. You had to be able to own land. You had to take a test before you could have that opportunity. Now we don't have to have those procedures in place or those barriers in place to keep us from being able to have the right of voting. Let us move forward with this piece of legislation so that everybody will be able to have a right to vote and be able to participate in this democracy. Thank you.
Ms. Robinson in the affirmative. Mr. John.